Jim Renacci, and I'm the host of the American Greatness, America First War Room. I thank you for being here. This is our second podcast, and we're going to be talking about a lot of great subjects tonight. House leadership, now that we know the direction things are taking, some of the roles, the committee roles, also Biden's climate initiative, and also we're going to talk a little bit about the 2024 presidential election, which already seems to be heating up. We have a great guest tonight, Ed Henry, host of American Sunrise on Real America's Voice. He is that host from 8 to 10 every weekday morning. All right, it's with my great pleasure that I bring on our special guest, Ed Henry, and again, who I said is the host of the American Sunrise on Real America's Voice from 8 to 10 every morning, Monday through Friday. Ed, thank you for being with us.
Great to be with you. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Ed. Look, some of the topics I want to talk about today, you're familiar with. We just got through an election, House leadership. Kevin McCarthy now has a very slim margin that he's going to be dealing with. When I was in Congress, we had a 29-seat majority, and it was still tough to get a lot of things accomplished. But I'd like to hear your thoughts and where you think things are going to go.
Look, it's going to be very tough for Kevin McCarthy to even get the job. Let's be honest. It's not a done deal yet. He's gotten this sort of endorsement from the House Republican Conference. But as you know better than anyone, you've got to actually get a vote of the full House at the beginning of the new Congress in January. I'm not sure he's got the votes locked up yet. There may be somebody who's seen as more America first, whether it's a Jim Jordan, or Andrew, Andy Biggs out in Arizona is talking about running. So let's see where that goes, because this FTX story that's blown up, allegations that that McCarthy used some of this dirty money from the cryptocurrency exchange. Most of the money went to Democrats. Gateway Pundit and others have stories suggesting that McCarthy may have used some of the money to get Madison Cawthorn, some of the MAGA, seen as MAGA candidates, out of the way. He's got some issues with his conference. Let's see how that goes. If he does become speaker, you're right. It's going to be a thinner majority than when you were in Congress. I think the bad news for a Speaker McCarthy or whomever the speaker is that there's no room for error. And any block of Republicans who are not happy, whether they're some of the rhinos who might want to shift things to the middle, or maybe some of the America First folks who think he's not doing a great job, they're going to have great influence. But the good news for a Speaker McCarthy or whomever gets the job is that you have the majority, whether it's by 1 seat or 2 seats or 30 seats. You have the gavel, you run the committees, as you know, and you set the agenda. And I think, number one, you put a brakes on the Biden spending spree. And number two, we're going to see a flood of investigations, not just the traditional ones that people are talking about, the Hunter Biden laptop. I think you're going to see some real answers finally about January 6th and the DC gulag. These political prisoners have been held, some without criminal charges yet. The conditions at that prison, outrageous. We need to get some accountability, some oversight that has been sorely lacking in the Biden administration.
Well, you're exactly right, and I appreciate those comments. If you think about it, all of those issues now will come to the forefront, and exactly the committee chairs will have the ability to set the agenda and move many of those things forward, whether it's the Biden laptop, whether it's some of the things that have occurred throughout the Biden administration. They're going to have that ability to move those issues forward. And as you said, and it sounds like you would agree, that's probably going to be the one thing they can do. It's going to be very difficult to get anything done with the Senate still having a Democrat majority.
Yeah, absolutely. But look, the Biden administration is going to have to do something they weren't willing to do, which is reach across the aisle a little bit. And if they're going to get anything done at all, they're going to have to work with the House Republicans, number one. Number two, what I would keep an eye on, and I know you know this, is you remember when you were in Congress, this idea in December, there are these omnibus spending bills. They call them Christmas trees because everybody wants to put an ornament on it with their pet project or whatever. This is going to be the mother of all Christmas trees, because you're going to have Chuck Schumer, particularly Nancy Pelosi, saying, what are we going to do to decorate this tree? Every single socialist dream they're going to try to stuff into some kind of spending bill. And I think it's imperative on not just Kevin McCarthy as the current House Republican leader, but Mitch McConnell, who's shown a willingness to write these hot checks to Ukraine, not put a brakes on the Biden spending spree. They better not go home for Christmas allowing the Democrats to stuff in all these things that they know they won't get done next year. They're going to try to jam it in December, right after Thanksgiving. I think people in your audience should be on alert about that.
Well, you're exactly right. And it is interesting. That will be the time to stuff everything in while the Democrats have control of the House and the Senate. And they'll say, look, do you want to shut the government down? That will be the big issue going forward. Do you want to get a spending bill passed? You know, Republicans, they'll try and blame Republicans. And of course, as you're aware, the big issue next year is going to be the debt ceiling and the increase in the debt ceiling. And Nancy Pelosi was pretty smart. She pushed that off to next year, forcing the majority to make that decision, which will be the Republicans.
That's right. And Donald Trump has pointed out that Mitch McConnell on the Senate side gave in on some of that and was not tough enough with the Biden administration. And I think Trump was disappointed. I think a lot of America First people were disappointed because the can got kicked down the road. And Trump's point has been that Mitch McConnell had some leverage and did not use it, and allowed the debt ceiling vote, as you say, get kicked down the road to next year, when now it'll be in the Republicans' lap as well. They'll have some responsibility. But B, that allowed even more spending by the Biden administration. It's high time that we put the Biden administration in check. But I think it's also worth calling out the Republicans. I'm somebody who looks at all sides of this. There have been a lot of Republicans who have been along for the spending sprees, going back many years. And it's time to put the brakes on that. We're over $30 trillion in debt, as you know. Look at this runaway inflation. And it's amazing to me that the Biden administration was able to basically lie, let's say it, for almost 2 years in saying that more federal spending was not going to put gasoline on the fire in terms of inflation. But you have even Democrats like Jim Clyburn in recent weeks have said that federal spending only accelerated inflation. Of course it did. We knew that, but they denied it over and over. It's time to get our fiscal house in order, and it's time to get this inflation in check.
I'm glad you said that, because even when I was in Congress, I was one of those people who said we have to stop this spending. And back then, it was only 10 or 11 trillion dollars when I first got to Congress. It is now over 30 trillion, and nobody's talking about it. Nobody seems to be talking about it. It's one of the reasons why the debt ceiling will force the discussion. But at the same time, you're exactly right. Republicans are as much to blame over the years. We have allowed spending to continue to go forward. I was always one that was fighting that. But let's face it, even during the Trump administration, spending was continuing. And we need to take a real close look at what we need to do going forward to bring this spending down. Because, as you said, the spending cannot continue to go without it being slowed down, stopped, and turned back. Right.
Yeah. And look, there were some legitimate spending. I get it. I remember covering the second Bush administration, and they had this prescription drug benefit and had the Democrats beating them up on prescription drugs. And they felt like they had to do something about it. But what do? Do you create this unfunded mandate that just keeps growing and growing within Medicare? And now Medicare, Social Security, all the entitlement programs are running out of money. And so it's been Republican administrations, not just Democrats, who have spent the money, as you say. Donald Trump spent a lot of money when he was president. I get it. Some of that had to do with COVID. Some of that you can look the other way on. Some of the Biden spending was post-COVID as well. But then I think Biden took the COVID excuse and it was runaway federal spending. And we've seen that. Look, the Inflation Reduction Act did nothing to reduce inflation under Joe Biden. And really, we've now seen even Democrats on the campaign trail were admitting in the run up to the midterms, it was a mini Green New Deal. They were calling it a climate change spending bill. They were trying to tout it to liberal voters as, look, we did a whole bunch. We did part of the Green New Deal. That wasn't supposed to be what it was. That was supposed to be an Inflation Reduction Act. And as you know, it was just the opposite.
Well, exactly right. And, Ed, one of the things that disturbs me, especially here in Ohio, but across our nation, because you can multiply it city, county, state, but all these cities, all these counties, all of these communities received this COVID money. And
Yeah.
now they're sitting on COVID money. I can tell you the city that I'm sitting in right now, Wadsworth, Ohio, is sitting on $75 million. That's a small community, but think about all the other communities. Think about the state. Our state here in Ohio sitting on $36 billion extra COVID money that they're going to spend and spend and spend. You talk
Yeah.
about inflation. This is going to cause inflation to continue to go up because that money's already out there. And even Republican mayors, Republican county commissioners, and Republican governors are saying, we got to spend it. We're not going to give it back.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who does a lot of business in West Virginia, and he's talked about how they have a lot of unspent COVID funds. And look, they needed some of the money, but then now there's money that they're just going to spend because you spend it or lose it, use it or lose it. And then I think, too, if you push this forward, look what Joe Biden was doing in Asia. He had this situation where he's now agreed to this UN deal where we're going to pay U.S. taxpayer money into some kind of a global fund, which is sort of a reparations for these tiny countries, developing countries, who are dealing with climate change. Why are our taxpayer money? Why are we bailing out these developing countries? It makes you scratch your head.
Well, and again, I want to move to that, especially since that's something you talked about this morning on the American Sunrise on your Real America's Voice show. You were talking about the Biden's climate agenda. This is real interesting. This is more spending. This is more of something that I'm not sure America has the ability to take the lead on when other countries, now I know they all say they want to work and try, but America should not be the leader. America should be worried about America first and what American policies and principles are. Your thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are, A, we should not be bailing out these developing countries when, as you said a moment ago, we're $30 trillion in debt. You come to Congress and we're 10 or 11 trillion in debt. A few years later, we're up to 30 and counting. And now we're going to hand out money to Asian, African, Latin American countries who say they're getting decimated by climate change. It's not their fault. And somehow it's our responsibility. That's ridiculous. B, I don't understand, if you're going to do this as a global effort and the UN is leading this, where in the world is China? And that's the big problem for me, is that the Biden administration repeatedly lets China off the hook. If these developing countries want to come to the UN and other bodies and make the case that they're getting decimated by climate change, and we're going to show leadership around the world, where's the leadership from China? They're one of the biggest polluters, obviously, if not the biggest polluter in the entire world. So if there are developing countries in Asia saying we're getting killed by climate change, point the finger at China, not America. So I want to understand a key part of the America First agenda. Why is it that the hard-working American citizens watching your show, watching American Sunrise on Real America's Voice, why are we bailing out other countries, A, and B, why isn't China helping? If we're going to do it, I don't think we should, but why is China off the hook? And this happens all the time, and that's why Donald Trump pulled out of that Paris Accord. He got a lot of grief from the left, but early in his administration, he said, I'm going to worry more about Pittsburgh than Paris. And that was the work of Steve Bannon, now of the War Room at Real America's Voice, who was inside the White House, as you know. And they pulled out of that climate deal because China wasn't at the table. And so how do you let the biggest polluters walk away and yet we'll tie our hands and tie the hands of small businesses here in America? It makes no sense.
100% agree. And it's one of the reasons we do this podcast. It's one of the reasons the American Greatness Fund exists, because we want to be talking about America First policies across our nation, especially those states that matter in 2024. And that's why I want to roll over to the presidential election. Look, we have Donald Trump, who announced, I'm hearing across the country and many Republicans saying it was too early, especially with the race in Georgia. I'm also hearing from many that they're happy he did, they're glad he did, they want to see him run. And then there's the crowd of Republicans who say, we really want him to step aside and we want DeSantis to run. All interesting comments. There's going to be others running as well, Pompeo, many others who probably are going to, touch the water and see if they should jump in. What are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is Donald Trump's going to do what Donald Trump wants to do. If we've learned anything, right, it's that he's going to do, no matter if the mainstream media says this is a bad idea, he's going to go his own way. And I think there are rhino establishment Republicans who didn't want him to get in. I think there was a mechanical argument he had, which was he thought that the Justice Department was sitting there getting ready to indict him. If he gets in, it's harder for them to indict him, especially if he believes it's frivolous charges. And you know what? He was right on that score, because within 72 hours of that announcement last week, all of a sudden Merrick Garland gets checkmated and says, I don't have the guts to make this decision. That's basically what he did. I'm going to hand it off to a special counsel. Now, there are questions about that special counsel and how fair he's going to be. But I think Donald Trump wanted to get in here and say, look, I've danced around it long enough. I'm in. Now it gets to the question of, is he the most viable candidate? Is he the best person to win and advance the America First agenda? Right now, he's the giant in the race. And if I'm going to bet any money, I'm going to bet on him. The challenge, I think, for him is, if you look at these midterms, when you and I met at that Trump rally several months ago in Ohio, it was Donald Trump's endorsement that got J.D. Vance out of the primary to eventually win that Senate general election against Tim Ryan. It was Donald Trump. He's still the most powerful force in the Republican Party, number one. Number two, the vast majority, over 90% of his endorsements went his way. He won on a lot of these. But the third point I would make is, he didn't do as well in some of these battlegrounds in the general election. In the case of J.D. Vance in your home of Ohio, it worked. But I would argue that whether it's Nevada, Arizona, Pennsylvania, there were some other Senate battles where Donald Trump's endorsement got Dr. Oz all over the hump in Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But as you know, wasn't enough to win the general election. A lot of people feel like that was fraud, and that's the real reason. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be fights. But at the end of the day, Fetterman's the senator-elect. And so my point is, I'm not picking sides in the Trump potential battle with DeSantis, but DeSantis is going to be marketed by people against Donald Trump as the fresh face, maybe the younger, less baggage kind of form of the America First agenda. And what Donald Trump has to show is, yes, he's got that 45, 47, whatever the percentage is, hard Republican base that's going to be with him no matter what, till the last dog dies. But can he get these candidates in 2024 and himself over that 50+1? Even in a state like Georgia, you had Brian Kemp, who was not running with Trump. They don't get along much, and he wins by 8, 9, 10 points in the governor's race. And then Herschel Walker, who's Trump's guy, doesn't get to 50+1, now has that runoff you mentioned in December. We'll see how he does. I'm still betting on Walker. A lot of the money in the organization has gone his way. Brian Kemp has now said he's going to get his get out the vote there. But again, people are concerned about fraud in Georgia as well, we should note. But that's the challenge for Donald Trump. He's got that solid Republican. He's still the most powerful force in the Republican Party. But in 2024, when there are a lot of Senate Democrats up for election, more Senate Democrats than Republicans, the Republicans have this golden opportunity, like they just missed, to take the Senate back. They got the House. You and I have talked about that, but they came up short in the Senate. Is Donald Trump going to be the best person to bring Republicans in battleground states across the finish line in the Senate battles, as well as himself? I think he can get the nomination. Clearly, he's the most powerful force in the Republican Party. He's the giant in the room. But can he get that 50+1 in the battlegrounds? He can't win the presidential without Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, some of these states that A, there are real concerns about fraud, and B, some of his candidates did not get across the finish line. That's the challenge.
Yeah, I would agree. And what's interesting, and I hear this all the time, the greatest asset for Democrats is Donald Trump running, because he will energize the Democrat base as well. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's a get out the vote machine for the Democrats and the Republicans, right? Again, you and I saw that in Ohio. J.D. Vance won that primary, won that general election because he had Donald Trump and the MAGA folks, the America First folks. They turned out for J.D. Vance at Donald Trump's instruction. And let's not hide, J.D. Vance, I think, is a strong candidate. He stood on his own 2 feet. Now, push it forward. You raised a question a moment ago that I didn't address. Should Donald Trump have waited on his presidential announcement until after that early December runoff in Georgia? It's a fair question, because what's going to happen now in Georgia, the MAGA forces, as we just mentioned, are going to really get out there and vote for Herschel Walker. But the anti-MAGA forces are going to get out there as well and try to get Warnock, the incumbent Democrat senator, across the finish line. So let the best man win. And that's going to be yet another test for Donald Trump. In fact, your state of Ohio is kind of in the middle of this yet again, as it always is a big battleground. Remember, the last rally, as I recall, that Donald Trump did before the midterms was that Monday before Election Day on Tuesday. He did it. It was in the Dayton, Ohio area, I believe, and he was champing at the bit to announce that night. Some people have told me that he was talked out of announcing at the rally on the tarmac by Eric Trump and others, that he really wanted to announce. But I think some of them are saying, "Look, you announce in Ohio, you're going to get the MAGA people out." But to your point, I think you're right. He's also going to get the anti-MAGA people out. So at some point, the rubber's going to meet the road here. And Donald Trump's either going to show that he can get that 50+1 in the battlegrounds, or there's going to be a new face like DeSantis. I don't see anyone other than DeSantis really being able to challenge Donald Trump at this point. To me, it's a two-man race.
I agree with you there. And you're right. Herschel Walker's race is going to be a big race because we have Republicans now who are getting out and supporting Warnock against Donald Trump. So you got the Democrats supporting Warnock. You got Republicans who want to get out. It'll be interesting to see how strong Kemp will be, because he's going to step in and try and get his machine working as well. It's one of the reasons why many people have said they hoped that Donald Trump would have waited. But we'll see, because clearly this will be the first test. And if Herschel Walker does lose, as you probably know, many Republicans will say it is Donald Trump's fault.
And it's a question, right? Is Herschel Walker going to bring Trump in for a rally or not? I would anticipate that he's going to want to, because he's gone this far with Trump. If you start running from him in the final days, then you're kind of caught between, am I MAGA or not? You either go all in on MAGA or you don't do it at all. And so I would expect that if not a rally, he's going to get some phone call, town hall meeting with Donald Trump to get the vote out, because he's going to need the Trump forces out there. But there's an interesting phenomenon. I mentioned it in Georgia, where Brian Kemp outpaced Herschel Walker. He was the sort of non-Trump aligned governor, to say the least. They're not the best of friends, but same with DeWine in your home state, right? DeWine, while Vance won on his own in the Senate, DeWine did even better as a more establishment Republican governor in Ohio in terms of votes.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say about Ohio, which is a little different than Arizona, Pennsylvania, and other, is Ohio's Democrat candidate was horrible. So the top of the ticket was a little bit different. In fact, almost 600,000 less votes to the governor candidate this time than 2018 in Ohio. So I do think Ohio is a little different. The Ohio Democrat governor candidate did not even match the statewide Democrat candidates. She had less votes than them. It was not a good comparable when you compare to Arizona, Pennsylvania, where the Democrat governors or the Democrat candidates actually were able to have a base and energize the Democrats. I think in Ohio, Democrats actually voted for Mike DeWine. In fact, I know a lot of Democrats that voted for Governor DeWine. But we're going to see a little bit of difference in Georgia. And those are the states that matter, I think. It's going to be those key states. I'm hoping that Herschel Walker can pull this off. And I'm hoping that in the end, whatever happens, the America First MAGA movement it has to be the most important thing moving forward in the presidential election. I'm sure you would agree with that too.
It's the biggest force in American politics. It's what's keeping a check on at least some of this federal spending. Donald Trump, we do a segment on American Sunrise called Trump Was Right. Of course, I don't believe he was right about every single thing. But the point is, when you look at his approach around the world, where everyone in the mainstream media predicted he was going to get us into a nuclear war, when in fact North Korea and China and others were scared about what his next move would be and didn't dare challenge him. Putin didn't dare go in and try to take Ukraine like now because of Donald Trump's power and influence. Energy independence here at home. Joe Biden on day one killing the Keystone Pipeline, not just those jobs that were at stake, but also American energy independence. You can go down the line. So I think you're right. It's the biggest force in American politics. And who's going to lead that? Who's going to take it to the next level? Is it Donald Trump, like win one more for the Gipper? Or is it, hey, let's pass the torch to a new generation in the form of somebody like DeSantis? That's going to be the challenge for the Republican Party. I'll put one more state on the table for you to chew on. which is Nevada, another battleground. So you had Laxalt in the Senate race. Now, a lot of people, again, think fraud was the key factor and that the Democrats stole this one. But Laxalt was the Republican, backed by Trump, on board with the idea that the 2020 election was stolen, on board with everything that Trump was pushing. He loses by less than 1 point. In the governor's race in Nevada, as you know, Lombardo was also backed by Trump, the former sheriff. But in their big debate, Lombardo against the incumbent Democrat governor said that he didn't buy into Trump's idea that the 2020 election was stolen. Trump was furious about that debate, but Lombardo separated himself there, number one. And number two, in the debate, Lombardo was asked, was Trump a great president? And he said, no, I think he did a lot of great things. He did a lot of good things. But I don't think overall he was a great president. Again, Trump was enormously frustrated, as you can imagine, with that. But here's my point. Lombardo ends up winning that governor's race by about 4 points or so, because he gets the MAGA people out, but he separated himself and kind of ran as his own man. He walked back some of that stuff from the debate because Trump was thinking about pulling the endorsement, people have since said. But the point is, he had some distance from Trump. He wins in Nevada. Laxalt, who did not have distance from Trump, just barely loses. I put that on the table, and I think people should chew on that and see what lessons they learned from that.
It's a great comment. And in fact, it's something I've heard recently many, many times, that those candidates who came out and said the 2020 election was stolen and Donald Trump won did not win the elections when Donald Trump endorsed them, many of those races. And it's going to be interesting when you tally those up. There are a lot of endorsements that Donald Trump made of Republicans that won, but never said the 2020 election was stolen. So interesting comment you made there, because I'm hearing that more and more. And it's an interesting perspective when you
on
look
board
at it
with America First in the agenda, but running as your own man or woman, standing on your own 2 feet.
Right. Well, look, I want to thank you for joining us. We've covered some great topics. This is what the American Greatness America First War Room is going to be all about. And we appreciate you being on board. We look forward to working with you, talking with you, but also working side by side with you.
We're looking forward to that. We'll have you on American Sunrise. You've been a great guest before, and we'll have you back. But great being on with you and everybody in your audience.
I want to thank you for joining us on the American Greatness America First War Room. This is our second podcast, but we're going to have many podcasts in the future and many special guests as we talk about our nation, our country, and things that will affect you and our country going forward nationally. So thank you for being with us. If you liked what you saw and you're interested in being part of the American Greatness War Room, I ask you to go to AmericanGreatnessFund.com, sign up, join our initiative, donate if you like what you're seeing, and hopefully we'll see you again on many of the future podcasts. So thank you again. God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America.